Okay, it's 4:34. This is the Policy Committee meeting on November 19th. We have a quorum. We have Greg Davis, myself, and Dr. Gant. We also have Ms. Gallagher, Dr. Anderson, and Ms. Davis joining us for information. And today, well, let's call to order, I guess. And then the first thing on the agenda is to review the previous minutes, which I looked at earlier today, and I thought they were fine. Were there any other additions or changes to the minutes from, I think it's the 29th is our last meeting, October 29th. There's quite a few on there. All the E's and F's that we went through pretty quickly that one. I went through and compared them to, these were the ones that went to the last work session. So we've been through these and it matches the agenda for what we covered. So I think it's in good shape. Angela, you're shaking your head.
I apologize, Dr. Yeager. I was talking to Beth.
Okay, sorry. You looked very concerned there for a minute. All right, well, so can I get a motion then to approve these minutes if they're all right with everybody?
I so move.
Second.
And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you. And I see Dr. Thomas has joined us. Welcome, Dr. Thomas. Thanks for coming. Next item is to approve the agenda. Today's agenda has 13 policies to cover. Can I get an approval or an amendment to the agenda?
I motion that we accept the agenda as written.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, Dr. Thomas, did you have anything you wanted to tell us today?
No, ma'am, nothing new policy related. We're just continuing to navigate the world of COVID and trying to maintain some sanity in the process. And that is it. So I have nothing to report and just looking forward to working through the next set of policies.
I know you can, you're just very excited.
So excited. Had some good conversation though. You know, it is a good learning experience because coming in into my role, I haven't had to delve into policy like this. So it really has been a good learning experience.
Yeah, for me too. And hopefully for the new board members who've been sitting in on it as well. Okay, chair's report. I don't have much to say except that once I finish this panel that I'm doing this week, my goal is to finish up sort of the final report for Cognia and have that ready for everybody on the policy committee and then eventually to the board. I've asked to have this last set of policies added to the agenda for the called meeting coming up in early no, let's see, when is it coming up? Yeah, the early December one, the extra called meeting. I think we're going to get through them hopefully pretty quickly, and then they can go on the agenda and be moved forward in time to include in the report. That's my goal. In which case we will have reviewed A's, B's were reviewed before we started, C's, D's, E's, F's, G's, L's, and M's. So we would just have not managed to get very far through the I's and the J's, but I think hopefully Cognia will be adequately impressed, hopefully. So
Dr. Yeager, can I ask a question?
Yeah.
I think I heard you mention wanting to include this in the Cognia report, like an update.
Well, in the sort of report to them, yeah. Is that all right?
Yes, it is. But that report is a draft of that report goes in tomorrow, so it has to be in two. And so that's what we'll be discussing on the December 1st meeting.
Okay.
And so I don't know. Maybe you and I can talk a little bit later, like after this, because James's work. James has pulled together everything. And so it may be, in fact, there may be an aspect in there that, you might want to take a look at or let us know if something is missing.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. I will either gather my wits on that really, really quickly in time for it. Well, I guess, yeah, we'll talk about it later.
Okay, yeah, we can talk about it later.
Yeah. I sort of have been keeping you up to date. I would just want to add these in as the sort of final count. But that's the idea. I think we're working towards that. Okay. Moving on then, we have 13 policies on our new business. These are the L's and the M's. And so I believe Mr. Davis and Mr. Harris worked on these with some input. Well, welcome, Dr. Maddox.
Hello, I'm sorry, we have a Saturday meeting going on at the same time, and I'm
No
out.
problem. Thanks for joining us. So Greg and Lawrence worked on these, and then I think was Karina involved in that conversation as well?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And so they've made recommendations, and then those recommendations went through Mr. Pruitt, who made some additional comments and suggestions, and then Lawrence and I worked through them at the last agenda meeting. And so they've evolved just a little bit here and there, but I think, Lawrence, I'm going to hand it over to you if that's okay to go through them, or do you want me to pull them up and then you can talk about them?
I'm happy to talk to them, Dr. Yeager, and if there's
Okay.
anything I missed out or you want to correct me, I'm happy to do that as well.
Okay, so the first one is LA.
So the first policy is LA. We recommended rescinding LA mainly because it is covered in policy KCB, which is actually was recently went out for public comment. That policy covers community engagement in district decision making. Do you also want me to cover Dr. Yeager, Attorney Pruitt's memo, or I know you normally read it and.
Yeah, well, yeah, either that or Mr. Pruitt can chime in.
Okay, Mr. Pruitt also concurred with the rescinding the policy as well.
Okay, some of them will be simpler than others, I think. Okay, so the main thing was just it overlapped with KCB, was unnecessary. Okay.
So may I make ask a question, and then I can stop thinking in this vein. But it seems to me like when I look at the list of the policies, the first thing I see is a breakdown where we have A is all school district organization, B is school board operations, C general school administration, all the way down to we're on policy L, is that right? And those are interorganizational relations. And so something sets that up as something that the board values and that we have policies around. And so LA seems to me like another introductory kind of policy that just says, yeah, we have visions or we have goals and objectives around interorganizational operations. So it can be a simple statement, but it does state, to me, it kind of takes us out of having to go to the law books to find out what the role is or what that rule is. So again, it's to me a placeholder to say it's a value that the board holds in terms of how it operates in the district.
Well, I think, I mean, my opinion, and again, I'm not on any time, I'm never going to fall on my sword on any of these, but I do think that is integral to our mission statement. And so if I were to come in and from outside of town to come in and say, well, what is Clark County School District? What are their objectives? What is their purpose in being? I would look more at the mission statement. I wouldn't necessarily go to policy. And so that's why I did concur with with what Pruitt said, as Mike said, that it's just it's a statement of philosophy, not really a policy. I certainly couldn't see any regulations flowing from it.
So Linda, I think the main reason this is being rescinded is because it's redundant with KCB. And if you look at KCB, it does state, I believe, the policy or the philosophy that I think you're looking for.
I did look at KCB, and again, K is general public relations. And so, yes, we can say all interorganizational relations fall under general public relations, then therefore we should probably move all of the L policies to K. that's my only thinking on that.
Other board members want to chime into the conversation?
I'm just, again, I guess my ultimate thing is I'm trying to whittle down the vast number. I mean, we've been told that we've got more policies than most school districts have. And so I'm just trying to when people look at our policies, I don't want them to think it's like an encyclopedia. But
Again, the only thing that the board does is set policy and evaluate the superintendent hire and fire. And so again, if we don't have our values expressed in terms of how the organization is built, managed, and run, then I would love to know where we actually get that guidance in terms of building a strategic plan and managing our relationships. So again, it seems a harmless thing to have an introductory policy. And I looked at each one of the first policies and all of the different categories, and they're all about the goals and objectives of the school district as expressed by the board. So that's my point. And it's not so much that we have to go to a law book or go to a different section to understand how. It's simply, to me, just a further statement of the principles for operation. And if I have that wrong, then I want to know if we should somehow have that expressed someplace else that we can go, because we are not lawyers. The public is not lawyers. Nobody's lawyers. And when you take this job, you go to the policy manual to try and understand what the work is. So again, if there's no direction there, then I'm fine. But if we're going to have a section called interorganizational relations, I think there should be some introduction to it that points us to those other places that we might get more specificity.
So Linda, it would be your recommendation to just use most of the second paragraph? It shall be the desire of the board to establish positive working relationships with other public and private organizations, contribute to the education process and the general welfare of the citizens of the community.
I absolutely love that statement. Thank you.
So, Mr. Davis, you said you weren't going to die on this sword. I can see Mr. Pruitt squirming just a little bit, but I'm not going to die on this one either. I would like to clean this up just a little bit. Mr. Harris, what do you think?
Yeah, because I don't think we want to start the sentence with therefore if there's nothing before it.
Just
But
it shall be.
yeah,
So delete the first paragraph and the first word of the second paragraph and capitalize the I. No, Mr. Davis, you want to?
I guess I would just like to I would like to hear from other committee members, and if the other committee members think it should stay, then that's what I'm talking about. I understand Linda's philosophy, and so we've had that discussion, she and I, many times, and so I know people are tired of it. So I like to hear from other board members on the committee.
I don't have a dog in this fight. I really don't. I mean, it's whatever. I don't see, it's up to, I didn't come in thinking that, that I would really want that to stay. So I don't really have any comments to that. I'll just comment like if I have a comment. Other than that, I'm listening.
Okay. Ms. Gallagher and Dr. Anderson. Well, is Keisha there? I can't. Dr. Gant. Oh, there you are. I see the ceiling. It sort of looks like a cushion or something.
I'm looking.
Have you got a philosophical opinion?
I mean, I'm of the mindset that if we don't need it, then it shouldn't be there. I think part of our values, I do hear the idea that, how else do we understand how the organization runs? But I also think we have our strategic, goals, right? That should also be able to give a sense for how what the things are that we value and some of the things we do in order to uphold those values and reach those goals. And so I'm tending towards, I agree. I don't think we need this. We have a lot of policies, and today, even if we have it here, if we can't remember them, it's hard to then know where to find them, and it's also hard to follow them. But again, I don't know if this means that we might need to take it to the full board for further consideration, but I agree that it can be rescinded.
Dr. Anderson, would you like to chime in? Or
I mean,
Ms.
I'm
Gallagher?
I have the same thoughts. When you read a policy manual, they should contain policies, and it's just not a policy. It's more of a mission statement or sort of directive for a group, but it's not necessarily it doesn't read like a policy to me. And so rescinding it just seemed like a natural course to take to clean things up.
Okay. I guess, Dr. Thomas, I'll ask you if you have an opinion.
I was just gonna make a quick comment or question. So with our mission and vision, and then we have our core beliefs, when we did our work, and I'm sorry, I don't remember, at our last retreat with Sam and Julie, when we first started working on norms, did we do kind of a core beliefs as a board in that work? I know we discussed things that were important to us. Did we capture any of that in a written format, or did we just capture the norms? I just remember them talking about like what's important to you as a board.
Right. From my recollection, we, which is faulty at best, but we captured the norms. I do remember us having a broader conversation about like the things that we valued each individually as a board
Right.
member under the previous leadership. But Dr. Thomas, I think you were there too. That was something that was led by Dr. Means, where all board members talked about what was important,
Okay,
what were
maybe
our
that's
values,
okay.
and how that, and then they took that feedback and used it, I guess, to talk through the strategic plan or make any changes, or even just to know where board members stood. And I don't think we've done that yet, but Mr. Davis and Ms. Davis may have I know they've been here longer, so maybe they can add some corrections to that.
And maybe that's what I was thinking about. I was just trying to see if there's a place where, because I know this has come up in another policy from Ms. Davis. So I was just trying to see if there was a place where we captured and documented the beliefs of the board. Not that they're different than our core beliefs as a district, but more of operational. This seems to be like your operational beliefs or commitments. So that was my reason for asking.
Okay, well, I'm hearing that the policy committee itself is willing to rescind. And so I guess I suggest we move forward with that recommendation, and at the risk of having a long conversation at the called meeting, maybe we should have this conversation, in advance by email, let people know that we're sort of hashing this out and move forward.
Yeah, I mean, it may come down to a vote in the end. So, I mean, we can't always expect to be nine zip on a decision.
It does seem to me that the values expressed, I mean, I like having philosophical statements in policy. I think that there is room for that. At least that's my training from Dr. Myers when I first landed in this seat. So I'm okay with philosophy in general. So I don't have a big problem leaving in the last part of that sentence personally, but I will entertain a motion and a vote.
A motion that we rescind LA.
Completely.
completely.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, so that's 3 in favors. So let's do that, and then we can talk some more at the board meeting or have an email about it. Okay, Mr. Harris, would you like to carry on with LDA, which is a revision?
Yeah, so LDA, we recommended revising it where it says no legal obligation to, it said statutory to. So we changed it to that the board as an individual body has no legal obligation to other governmental bodies. And then we added with government to the second paragraph because it said community agencies, but it didn't mention government, but the policy is called local government. So we just wanted to align the language.
Pretty straightforward.
An attorney recommended rescinding and then changing the word statutory, which we did.
So
Yeah,
this
I
one could
recommended-
also be rescinded? You
Yeah,
said,
this is another one of those. I'm not sure what this tells you that it's not common sense that you wouldn't know otherwise.
okay.
I'm just going to say that common sense isn't out there for everybody, Mike, and it has been a struggle for us to understand our relationships. And so I really do look to this policy manual for guidance to new people coming onto the board and for the public in general when they're looking at what drives our decision making. So I appreciate that comment, but we don't all think the same way. And if we come onto the board with no board experience and no corporate experience and you know, again, because we just aren't required to have that as board members, a lower level of explanation, if you will, than the law, I think is very critical to how we actually explain ourselves and capture this 200-year-old institution's driving forces, which again, at least if you've got it in writing, you have an opportunity to change it. When you look at what necessary changes should be made when you changed your structure. So when we changed to a charter system, we didn't look at these policies to say, okay, how much of this fits with our thinking in terms of how we do a local school governance team. My concern is I don't want us to have to start from scratch and understanding what we do and to build a structure. I think we would start with what we have built and see how it needs to change to accommodate the new structure. And I'm afraid I don't want to see us lose that structure. So with that, I'm probably going to drop off of this call and I will try and catch you guys in the board meeting.
Linda, can I make one comment before you do that?
Sure.
Okay. For this, you and I share the same. I agree with you in terms of the end result. The way I'm looking at it, and maybe I'm just so concrete thinking, but there are different states and different locales where school systems are an appendage of local government. And so this clarifies the fact that this is not true in the state of Georgia. It's not true in our school district. And so insofar as there are places where local government bodies do have a say in terms of the running of the school system, I'm in favor of keeping this in. So I don't think you and I thought the same way about it, but we came to the same conclusion.
I would, yeah, typically, I think this one, it makes a little bit, it seems like it may belong a little bit more simply because if you look at our work, particularly right now, we are trying to reestablish or build the capacity with the local government. And I also think of this, although it doesn't directly speak to, we have had, I think at least once, one request for like by another, I don't know if it would be considered like governing authority back in our, during the time where there was a lot of turmoil, requesting that we add something to our agenda, which was, I'm blanking on what it was, but it didn't happen. But it is good to at least, have as a reminder that the board that we operate, we have autonomy, that and that is related to the decisions that are made, as well as far as like school functioning, but then also, when people have different opinions about who the superintendent is and who needs to be hired and fired, that the board still operates as a governing body, and other governing bodies don't have permission to, I guess, impose upon that. So that's my thinking, but I would tend to agree with you, Greg and Ms. Davis.
Okay. Any other comments or questions about this one? Shall we move on it?
Yes, I move that we accept it as altered.
Revise? Okay,
As revised, yeah.
second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Mr. Harris, would you like to review LDAJA, interrogations and investigations?
Yeah, so expected a bit of conversation with this one. This policy is written that the Clark County School District and the Board of Education will cooperate with local enforcement agencies. We recommended reviewing it. I did talk with our Chief of Police, Chief Sizemore, and our just internal staff just to make sure it kind of aligned with our practices. I know that Attorney Pruitt, you had a different perspective or recommendation for rescinding. So just expect to have some conversation about this one.
Mr. Pruitt, can you clarify your reasoning about the issue of child abuse and how that overlaps or overlays with this interrogation policy?
Right. I assume there's only two situations this is talking about: when law enforcement is investigating a student for a crime, or more commonly, I would think, is when DFACS is investigating an allegation of child abuse. And those are pretty sensitive situations. Sometimes it might not be appropriate for a school official to be in the room while that's happening. Now, if you tell me that, the director of social work says that always is the case, then okay. But I don't know. It just seems like that, we have federal and state laws that govern that, and this policy seems a little more restrictive than those, and I'm not sure why we want to do that.
Thank you. I all of a sudden I had it came to me when I was a school counselor, and I would have a child under my desk who would not get on the bus and was just having a meltdown. Not only did I call DFACS, but I got out of the room as well. So I was not part of that investigation of that child. And so that, at least the practice in Richmond County, when DFACS came in to investigate, we didn't have we didn't have the principal there, or the vice principal, or the counselor, or even a social worker there. So I totally concur with. I didn't even read that in there. I guess I just glossed over it. So that's that second point. Now I don't know about the rest of it.
So
But is the second point not addressing law enforcement though during the interrogation? That the law enforcement officers cannot interrogate a child without a school representative?
yeah, maybe we just need to add that word, Lawrence, to add it to any law enforcement interrogation.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Is that the case too?
I don't know. Is it not the case when DFACS comes that a school staff person is present for that interview, usually the counselor? Is that? I'm just trying to recall back to what seems like ages ago, but it wasn't. I thought we always had a district employee present.
We do.
Okay.
Why?
Just standard practice for us now. We tend to have a counselor, a social worker. I mean, I don't know if there's a reason why we do, but we do have a
Maybe it was because it was policy, but we've always had a district employee, a school employee present when a student is being questioned by an outside
I
agency.
mean, if they're on school property, aren't they in our charge?
I think that's kind of been the rationale. I was thinking we're kind of like in loco, I guess.
But let me just say that when DFACS goes to the home, they talk to kids individually, privately. So so the parent is excluded. I mean, if the Department of Family and Children Services could not interview a child without either the parent present or in the case of the school with a parent representative, which is what the school is when the parent's not there, then I don't think they would do their work.
I agree. I mean, so what are you accomplishing by being in the room? I mean, Zernona, if you're in the room when that's happening, so number one, you just made yourself a potential witness in the case. You may get a subpoena if it goes to trial. Number two, what are you going to do if the parent calls and says, what happened in that meeting? Because CAPTA says you're not, that's the federal child abuse law, says you're not supposed to reveal things to parents if there's a possibility of it causing harm to the child. I don't know why we would want to put ourselves in that dilemma.
Well, it seems a little bit, well, I don't know. It seems somewhat protective of the child, right? You have two people in the room. One is us, and we care about the kid. So
what are you going to do when the parent calls and says what happened?
We always would say we're not allowed to discuss that, but that was the standard answer. I don't know if that's the right answer, but.
And then, of course, if you just talk about school official, you on the one hand you have folks who are trained for that, like your school counselor, but then this doesn't even specify that. It could be it could be the head football coach or something. I mean, to me, with the confusing thing is when you say law enforcement, and that's how I read it, is in terms of the police, and that's why I didn't read it carefully enough to see what Mike was talking about, because I saw it in terms of the cops coming in saying, we want to see this kid, which to me is a different matter than, because law enforcement is not going to sit down and talk to a kid about child abuse.
yeah, so maybe the trick is to make this policy focus on law enforcement, because I think that's how we were reading it. So can we add a word that clarifies it in such a way that it doesn't trample on the potential defect issue? Or Dr. Anderson's chiming in. Yeah, she talks about objectivity. So again, I don't have any legal basis for the instinct of having someone from the school in the room whenever the child is being subjected to anything interrogation like. So I'm inclined to leave it alone, but if there is some clarification needed, I'm open to suggestion.
I'm wondering if it's possible because I also think this might be a little bit different in the high schools, but I'm not fully sure. I'm trying to go back to my time there, and I don't remember all, counselors being in the room with the high schooler when they were being questioned. But I'm wondering if it would be helpful to get the perspective of someone who is in counseling or someone who is in the schools, who sort of knows how this plays out. Yeah. It might be different across developmental stages as far as what the child needs.
Okay.
But I get what Mr. Pruitt is saying as well, you know, if it's captured in our, in the law anyway, but I am just curious to know what schools are doing, because even if we remove it, but then schools are still, people are still sitting in meetings, then that still means we don't really speak to it. That just means that people are in some meetings, and at other schools they may not be. So,
So is Dr. Watley needs to take a look at this then, perhaps? Dr.
I would
Thomas?
think Dr. Watley, and in collaboration with Ms. Crystal Gillis, who is our director of social work.
I've seen with defects in particular, not with the police, which this should probably focus on, but with defects, for instance, if a student does not feel safe in the room with the person from defects, then the person from whoever they trust the most is the person who goes in the room with them so that they're more comfortable. And I've seen that happen quite a few times in our district. But but like Lakeisha was saying, it's really, it looks different based on the school and their understanding of social emotional development and personal space and confidentiality. So it really just depends when it comes to defects, which I really there are whole laws around it.
So are there not defects guidelines about who's in the room when you interrogate a child about these things? It seems like those would be in defects guidelines.
So interrogate is a really strong word.
Yeah.
And for this policy, interrogation just straight to the to law enforcement, not defects. So but defects does have their own policies and understandings with whoever they speak to about coming. And if the referral comes from outside of the school, then defects is guided by, they have their own policies and procedures, but they still go through the district the same way Dr. Thomas was talking about earlier. So it just looks different, but this policy doesn't even come close to what that process actually looks like or how it should look like. But that's just my 2 cents.
Dr. Eric, for clarity's sake, I'm just curious if this one is talking about law enforcement, because we do have policy JGI, which addresses child abuse and defects from the perspective of social work and our responsibility of reporting to defects and I think it's even a regulation. So actually, Angela, maybe JGI R1. I'm just wondering if we need to, before we get this to Dr. Watley, do we need to clarify that this is not, that this is or is not, in fact, talking about law enforcement as in police officers? Because to what you're saying before, the way this policy was read and when I checked, is that it's basically saying we will not allow a child to be interrogated by a police officer or a law enforcement officer without a staff member present, that it has to be done in private. It can't happen in the middle of a classroom with other students present, other people around. So I think the first step may be to clarify what LDAJA, who we're actually saying when we say law enforcement, and is that different than JGI R1, which talks about child abuse?
That makes sense to me. I would, that's why I was having trouble understanding Mr. Pruitt's comment, because it didn't even occur to me that this was related to federal defects types. So I kept thinking this is police officers coming into the school to interrogate a child about something. So
can I raise?
Go ahead.
Can I say one more thing, and I'll shut up, because I don't think my opinion is being received well. But even in the context of law enforcement, are we sure that all of these rules are going to be the best course of action in every single case? For example, if police officer shows up and says, I'm here to interview this 17-year-old about molesting a 2-year-old that lives in another county, and you don't really need to know that child's name and identity and all of that, and I'd rather you not be here. Are we going to insist on being there? As to number 4, we're going to notify if the police officer says, I'm arresting this guy, there's 2 other people that were involved in that murder, and I'm about, and I don't want them tipped off before we get to them. Are we going to say, nope, we're about to call his mom and tell him he just got arrested for murder? you know, this is my point, is that do we really want to dictate these kind of details in policy when it might be better left to specific situations and figuring it out then? But I will shut up and say no more.
I think we're in a climate where some of us are a little less trusting of federal agencies and law enforcement agencies than we might have been not so long ago. So I guess that's where I'm coming from, is a trust issue, and why it feels better to have somebody there. But I'm open to conversations. What do other people think? Do we want to table this one for now and revisit?
I think we want to table and bring other people into the discussion, but I also think we need to identify what best practices are, because it sounds like with the case of DFACS, it sounds like that in Clark County, you know, we have a history of doing it a certain way, and I know Richmond County had another way, and so. And I don't know what state law says, but it just seems to me that we need to see what best practices are when we start talking about, and maybe Lakeisha's right in terms of maybe there's a age graduation. Maybe age has something to do with it as well. So definitely table it.
So the only thing about tabling it means it stays in effect. So that's, you know,
Can I ask something? If it's going to be tabled, is it possible to look at possibly separating this policy in some way to be very clear when you're talking about criminal activity versus when you're talking about issues of child abuse and neglect? Because that's where I think I automatically went to. But yeah, if these can be separated in some way, because those two things are not at all the same, I think that would make a lot more sense as viewing them as policies.
Dr. Yeager, does you may have already said this and I may have missed it somewhere. Do other districts have this policy? I mean, like in your search, have you been able to?
I have not done that work. I need to do that. So that would be another reason to postpone.
Yeah, I would say like looking to that. I mean, I'm open to tabling it, but then certainly if it is rescinded, I'm still more so interested in knowing how different schools then go about this, because even if it's not policy, there's still going to be a process by which schools address this, even if it is use your discretion and determine, you know, like at what point do adults need to be present.
Okay.
And I do think that that needs to be front and center. I mean, it doesn't need to be buried in old business. I mean, I think it's a very important issue, and so perhaps in January that will be number one.
I mean, we can just even move it to December.
Okay.
I think postpone it until our next policy meeting, and I'll do some research. And Dr. Thomas mentioned Ms. Gillis, Dr. Gillis. Sounds like we might want to just gather some data on the thing. I'm sorry I didn't do that before this meeting. Okay, it's 5:17. We've still got a few to go through. Hopefully the rest will be fairly straightforward. Mr. Harris, well, do we need to take a vote to postpone? A motion? Or just do we agree? So
Yeah,
moved.
agree.
Second?
Okay.
All in favor? Okay. All right, Mr. Harris, we've got LEB, which was one of the ones you recommended to be rescinded. It's parent organizations.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. And we included parent organizations, community groups, and we actually added LSGTs to KCB. If y'all recall, when we did that, there was work that Karina, Mr. Davis, and I did, I guess 2 months ago at this point.
So it's just redundant.
Yeah, we just added on to KCB, into community involvement.
Okay. Can we do a cluster of these in one vote rather than
Sure.
keep voting individually, unless there's conversations about that one? Booster organizations.
The only revision here was a recommendation from Mr. Davis that we add some comments around encouraging diversity in our booster clubs. So we did add a line that is also encouraged that these organizations strive for a diverse and representative membership body. So that was in addition to what was already there.
And then in the regulation, we added 3 lines recommended by Mr. Pruitt. Is that right?
Yes, ma'am.
Questions, comments about that one? LEG, business and labor organizations to be rescinded.
Yeah, this was recommended to be rescinded because it basically said that any agreements with individual schools or made between the business and the principal and subject to board approval. And our schools do develop their own local partnerships, as you know, with community organizations. So it's not compliant with practice or not current practice.
Okay, Mr. Pruitt agreed. Okay, comments about that one? Okay, should we have a vote on the remaining L's then? So we have LEB, LEC, LECR1, and LEG to be moved forward. And then we'll move to the M's.
I move that 4, 5, 6, and 7 on the agenda be moved to the entire board for consideration.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So we've lost
Aye.
Dr. Maddox. She was pulled away, so it's just the 3 of us. Okay. All in favor? Yes, we did. Okay. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 M policies. Mr. Harris, would you like to explain the number 8 and number 9 are related in terms of RISAs being rescinded?
Yeah, so me and Attorney Pruitt had similar comments. RISAs are now covered in state law, so not required in local policy. Also, one of the things we did is recognize we're gonna always have to update this language based off if RISA changes any of their focuses or organizing, we'd have to update the list of whatever the RISA is focused on. So it didn't make sense to have it in our policy manual. And ME is very similar in that it's covering RISAs. ME is talking about what RISA is, or that it's an educational research service center.
Ms. Gallagher and Dr. Anderson, do you know what RISAs are?
I am not familiar with them, at least not that I can remember.
Just for the record, Mr. Harris, can you explain what RISAs are and how they're, I mean, I guess they're covered by law, so we don't need them in our policy, but.
So I'll do my best to describe how to describe a RISA. Essentially, we have, I don't know how many RISAs we have in the state. It was actually in this policy, I think it's 16 or however many it says, but basically they serve the districts in the region by which they exist. So we're part of the Northeast Georgia RISA. Our surrounding counties are part of that. So rather than have individual institutions that we partner with to do research and kind of best practices, we're all able to access the Northeast Georgia RISA for professional learning, PD, staff development, just different tools. So we access them, Oglethorpe, pretty much the counties around us that are in the Northeast Georgia region.
Oglethorpe, I think we're Oglethorpe, Madison, Walton County, Social Circle, Madison, let's see, Jackson County, Jefferson City, Commerce City. I'm missing some. There are 13 in our area, RISA.
And
Mr.
these are state organizations, or they're school board or school organizations sort of?
There are 13 school districts in our Northeast Georgia RISA.
They're state organizations. Every school district in the region that's drawn by the state is a member automatically.
Right.
You get the professional development. They provide what they call related services and shared services like physical therapy, OT, deaf and hard of hearing, vision, probably missing one. We also run our Rutland Center, our
Yeah.
GNETs our particular part of GNETs is run through RISA. So they perform a lot of functions.
But they don't
Thank you
need to be within our policies because we don't have any control over what they do. Is that right?
Well, that's right. I mean, to the extent, I mean, they are what they are. We don't have to define what they are. Or what, I mean, we can't, as Lawrence said. I mean, I'm not even sure that list is still up to date. What we do, I mean, to the extent that we deal with them, we contract with RISA on a case-by-case basis. I mean, we've got an intergovernmental agreement, and we're actually a part owner of that Rutland building, along with all the other districts that are a member of Northeast Georgia RISA. So that's a separate set of contracts. Every year, the board approves your contracts for your shared services that you get through RISA, your OT and whatnot. So, I mean, it's just a contractual arrangement. It's not really a policy arrangement.
Yeah, it's an arrangement. Okay. All right. Thank you for that. I want to be able to go back and listen to that because every time we come up, I have to scratch my head. Okay, so moving on, MF was also a rescind. This was at colleges and universities. Mr. Harris?
Yes, sorry. MF, we felt that it was a belief statement, and then we already have a policy where the superintendent informs the Board of Education of any contracts that we enter into with any other agency. This one just specifically said that we would do it also for colleges and universities. I was trying to pull that up.
Any questions about that one? Okay. MFB is just a review only. It had to do with student teaching and internships. And I know there was some discussion back and forth about this one, whether we pull it or keep it. No, actually there wasn't. This isn't one that had any discussion. This one was just consistent with practice, review only, right?
Yes, this is the policy that allows us to partner with colleges and universities for student teachers.
Okay, thank you. So review only. It's amazing that that one has not been touched since 1983. Happy to put a new date on that one.
Especially with our professional development schools agreement.
MK, it's pretty straightforward. I think I can even maybe handle this one, Mr. Harris. We're changing the name of the accreditation, which used to be, I guess, a while ago, Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, SACS, and is now Cognia. That's the only change. Is that correct? Did I have that right?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have to change it every time they change their name, I guess? Or can we just?
It had been advanced ed, and I guess we hadn't made that shift.
Well, okay. That's also hasn't been changed. Well, no, 2005. So. Okay, and then finally, Mr. Harris, I'm gonna let you do this one. Professional visitors and observers.
Yes, so there was a little back and forth on this one. So as you all know, we do have another policy that addresses visitors in the district. Most visitors go through the school. This policy addresses specifically professional visitors, which we had a lot of conversation about what kind of constitutes professional. So we try to use an example of this amazing person who may study in Antarctica wants to visit the school with their team of researchers. Do they show up at the school, or do they show up or let the superintendent know? So, you know, this policy basically says that the only thing we have said is it needs to be a innovative and collaborative program. So we did add or collaborative. This policy is, as Mr. Pruitt said, it's fine, but what makes professional different than the other one? And so we thought about delegation. You know, sometimes we'll have visitors from other countries or communities. And so rather than going to this principal, they should always alert the superintendent that they are coming to visit our district and our school. So it's almost the same language as our other visitor policy, just for professionals.
Yeah, I think it was more than just having someone come and speak. It was more like, you know, formal, like you said, delegations, groups of people coming in to view the school or whatever. That sort of stands differently than just an individual dropping by. So we talked about getting rid of it altogether, but then we kept it. Does that make sense, Greg? And
Yeah,
Lisa?
I think so. I mean, you know, it's again, it's not always clear what we mean by professional, but I was looking at it in terms of even in terms of if the education committee of the NAACP wanted to tour our schools, you know, to me, the superintendent should, she should be aware of it, you know, but I don't think that it's a big deal to get permission, but I think it's just something that versus someone who is going there for either to tutor or to mentor or to share with the class or something like that. I think there are people there who are there for professional reasons, loosely.
Dr. Thomas, did you have a thought about this one?
No, I was just reading. I know there have been times when we've had visiting professors come, and they generally have been from other countries who have wanted to observe, and that has been facilitated, you know, either by the superintendent or the Office of Instruction. The only thing I struggled with in my mind was just what Mr. Davis said. How do you quantify professional?
Yeah, I agree. I don't, it seems like there's some subjectivity in how it's qualified. And so I don't know that this adds anything or anything additional that we wouldn't be able to like pull out of the regular visitors policy, or that wouldn't be able to be handled like within the district itself, as far as like their own standard operating, you know, procedures. You might have a superintendent that comes in, right, who says, well, yeah, follow the visitation policy, but if we have these particular visitors, I would like to know. Or you might have someone that says, just no, you know, I need to get permission from, you know, I would like people to get permission from the superintendent, or leave that as principal's discretion. And so,
Yeah, so I guess, go ahead, sorry.
It just doesn't, I don't necessarily think that we need it.
So the difference between KM and this policy is the superintendent approval. So if there's a delegation part, that's the part. So KM just says individuals are welcome to visit district schools provided the principal or designee approves the purpose of the visit. So there's no discussion with the superintendent about anybody coming into a school as long as the principal approves. So this policy sort of sets a different bar for, I changed my mind on this when I thought about, like you said, some education group decides they want to come in and observe the school. Or like Greg says, some civil rights group wants to come in and observe the school. That's a higher level request. And it feels like that one goes a little bit higher than just the principal, but maybe no.
So when we were discussing this one, my question was kind of like, how many times do you need to get permission before it's okay for professionals? So my example would be, so like the Boys and Girls Club, the directors of the Boys and Girls Club, they're considered professionals because they work for a large organization, but their engagement is with students. And so from time to time, they'll show up to schools and check in on students. Do they need to get permission from the superintendent to continue checking on students at school?
Yeah, I look upon them as kind of volunteers, even though they're paid. I mean, they're not coming to the school to observe the operations of the school.
Right.
They're there to work with our students. I mean, I just don't. I just don't, and I know it is, I understand that with the gray area, but I don't want the superintendent to be in a situation of a gotcha moment, you know, where they're kind of taken by surprise that, you know, I didn't even know this group was what they were even visiting our schools. You know, or, you know, and so I guess I'm okay with the gray area, you know, because I think it would be worked out with the superintendent and the school leadership, the principals of each school.
So I guess this is more about, so to answer your question, Karina, like Boys and Girls Club is essentially a strategic partner with us, and we have programs in their school. We have staff that we pay to work with them. So they are kind of an extension of our work, and we've introduced them to building leaders to make sure that they know that they are allowed within the appropriate guidelines of operations to come to the school and engage in some of the things you're talking about. But then looking back at this policy, it seems like the key thing then is delegation. So it is about professional visitors, but this is about like some type of formalized group. So you don't want to look up, and there's an article in the paper that Japanese professors come to study such and such math at UGA and visits J.J. Harris Elementary School to see in action, and the superintendent has no idea. So I think that's where the intent of this is.
That's what I was thinking when we talked about
So
this,
it's
yeah.
not about a individual professional. I'm just getting here myself, just listening to everyone talk. So this is about the word was in there somewhere about a delegation. So a actual group, whether it was a civil rights group, I don't know, Caterpillar national headquarters come in and they want to go see these engines that they've donated being utilized in our schools. So that's a full group. So I don't, how do we capture that? Mike, maybe that punts back to you, but how do we capture that it's more of a formalized, structured group of individuals coming for some purpose?
All right, let me go back to that screen. Okay, well, I guess the first thing I'd say is the first sentence, first paragraph that says visiting schools with novel, experimental, innovative, or collaborative programs. So it sounds like y'all have already gotten away from that, because you're talking about now you're narrowing it down to just people coming to observe things, not people coming to bring any kind of program to us, right?
Yeah. So what do we delete that first paragraph, maybe?
Yeah, maybe.
And then the policy is just to ensure the continuity of educational program and guard against classroom interruptions, delegations, desiring to visit, da 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 da. It's just about delegations. It's not about this other stuff.
You think also maybe the last paragraph as well, if we're going to do that? The professional visitors arriving at school, because it's kind of covered in the second paragraph, then they should make arrangements to the superintendent. It's a repeat.
Okay.
I don't want to, even though it's a vague term, I really hate to lose the word professional, because that is what I'm getting at. I mean, it's not an occupation. It's a task. I mean, if I form a group called Save Taxpayers Money in Athens, Clarke County, and by God, I'm gonna have 5 people, and we're gonna visit every school, and so we're gonna come unannounced to a school and see if we can bully a principal into letting us walk around to observe if our money is being spent correctly.
Okay, so now you're trying to define what kind of delegations. I'm not sure professional captures it, because, for example, I mean, what if the shop foreman at Caterpillar want to come watch how those engines are being used. I mean, I don't know if those guys, I mean, professional, such a vague term. I don't know.
Yeah.
that
Okay. Okay.
anyway.
Okay. We'll leave it like it is. I just,
Well, no, I'm not poo-pooing your idea.
Yeah,
I'm just saying
no,
I'm not
just-
sure professional captures
Right.
it. It may need something else.
okay. Something about delegations desiring to visit our school, our system for for some reason, overarching. No, that's terrible. But I'm trying to figure out, why people are coming there. They're not working on individuals with students. They're not working with individual teachers or groups of teachers or groups of students. What about desiring to observe our system?
How about delegations with an educational connection to CCSD desiring to visit our system?
What if they're not associated with CCSD?
Or education.
Then why would they be here?
To make money. Or to study
would we-
children. Or to recruit children to participate in their something.
So
Or
it
take
seems
I mean,
like,
I was including like a delegation from Caterpillar as having an educational connection. I mean,
yeah.
they're helping us educate our students, and they're interested in making sure we're doing that in a way that, fits their job market needs. I guess I've got a broad definition of education, maybe. Okay, maybe that doesn't work. Throw that one out. But
I was thinking we had
ahead.
another policy. I don't remember which one or where, but there was another policy about people coming to the schools with their marketing stuff, and they wanted to get it out to families through the district. So that's what I was thinking about when you were talking, Mr. Pruitt. Like they don't have a direct educational, they benefit financially from children participating, like the circus thing, with their coupons. They have to.
We don't allow that, I don't think.
No, we don't. We just did that one.
So that's what I was thinking about when you were talking. They don't have a direct. So if we include educational, then we're just limited to people with an educational whatever. And then just saying, okay, well, everybody else, come on.
So
at everybody.
So how do people feel? I mean, we're coming up with all sorts of scenarios that speak to having the superintendent evaluate the value and the acceptability of having a group of people coming in and the role of disrupting or not disrupting the classroom. It seems, I mean, I'm okay giving the superintendent that authority to make the decision whether it's a good or a bad thing, which is why we need to keep this policy, I think.
So maybe we modify the second sentence to say the superintendent will determine if the delegation's purpose serves CCSD's mission, and if so, then makes the necessary arrangements, something to that effect.
But even if it doesn't, I mean, if it's a taxpayer group that's trying to catch it, catches in the act of wasting dollars, that's still, they have a right to come in.
No, they don't.
Really?
Really? No, I mean, we got 180 days or less since the changes back during the recession, with limited hours per day to educate these students. You don't get to come in here and disrupt our operations just because you want to see what's going on. That's state law.
So, Angela, perhaps the second sentence that starts with the superintendent, before the word then, put the superintendent can assess the relevance or value to the district and then choose to make necessary arrangements. Does that get to what you were just saying, Mr. Pruitt?
Yes.
Does
I
that
mean,
make
that's
sense?
just my suggestion.
Yeah. So it gives a little bit of, instead of her having to immediately make accommodations just because they announced their presence to her, she has a choice in the middle. We give her that choice to say, no, that's not going to work, or we're too busy, we're testing this week, you can't come in, or yes, of course, come observe, we're happy to have you. You know, she can make that decision.
I like it.
I agree.
And I'm okay with that. I would rather have her do that than say a principal try to make that decision on the fly when they just wander in off the street.
Yeah, I think principals know how to deal with individuals. It's just when a group comes in, you know, whether they're ministers or, you know, I think it's just, I mean, I think it puts the principal in a tight spot where they would have to make a decision almost instantaneously. And this way they could say, well, according to policy, you know, would you mind going through the superintendent and talking to them first, you know?
Should we change the word can to may? So is that give enough choice to the actions? Can assess, but then may make the necessary arrangements.
Right.
Okay. I'm pretty happy with that. What do you think? Dr. Thomas, you okay with that one? Lawrence got his thumbs up.
Yes, that provides more clarity, I think.
Okay, awesome. Can we get a vote on 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, the M policies? And then I'll try to move us to our next meeting in 15 minutes.
I so move.
You move them forward as discussed.
Yeah, move.
Okay.
Move to doing all the M 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
All right. Angela, does that work for you? All right. All in
Second.
favor? Oh, did we get a second? Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thanks,
Aye.
everyone. So much for thinking that would be short.
Never works out that way, Dr. Yeager.
I know. All right. Well, thank you.